Welcome back, everyone, to Meditations by Gregory T. Obert, bringing you the best new guided meditations and mental health conversations every week. I'm your host, clinical psychologist, Dr. Gregory T. Obert. Thank you so much for joining me today. This week's episode is a continuation of my series, the Therapy 101 series. If you are enjoying this series, please do share these episodes where you can. Leave a 5-star rating and review wherever you're listening to this. And once again, these are brought to you by my new private practice, Royal Oasis Psychotherapy Institute. If you are interested in starting therapy that is elite and discreet, go check out my website, which is in the link in the description below, or to the side, or to wherever you're listening to this. Now, I want you to take a minute, and I want you to imagine life as a highway, just like that wonderful song that always gets stuck in our heads. And sometimes you're going to hit smooth highways. Other times you're going to navigate sharp turns, detours, or even complete reroutes. And that's really what life transitions, the topic of today's episode, can really feel like. Sometimes they're exciting, sometimes they're scary, sometimes they're overwhelming. And today we're really going to be looking at how talk therapy can be a helpful GPS in those moments to help us just get back on track. So how am I defining life transitions? I define them as any big change in your life that may be expected or unexpected and is moving you into a new phase of your life, whether you want it to or not. So some examples of what this might look like: think about getting a new job. Think about moving. Maybe a relationship ended for you. Maybe a relationship started for you. All of these particular life transitions could benefit from some sort of talk therapy. Because at the end of the day, it can be a lot to go through a life transition, even if it's an exciting one. Even if we want that transition to occur, there are still going to be emotions that come up, thoughts that come up, and sometimes we need to sort through those with someone who is an expert at doing so. For those that are just joining this podcast, I'm a clinical psychologist who's been practicing in mental health for about 15 years now. And I have helped hundreds of people get through life transitions of their own. And in fact, I know how difficult life transitions can be because behind the doctorate, behind the therapist, I'm still a person. Yes, I have all the expertise, and I am still a person at the end of the day. And you know what? One of the most recent life transitions that I had was becoming a parent. Not once, but twice. The changes in my daily routine, in my life, were joyous and wonderful. I welcomed both of these kids into my world. And there were a lot of things that I wasn't expecting to pop up for me as they showed up into my life. Strain on my marriage for, hey, we got to stay up until really, really late. And we're trying to figure out with our first child, how do we become effective parents? How can we, make sure we're raising a wonderful, incredible child to go out into the world and be the next generation? And all of these things came up with our second child in a different way. Our first kid is a girl, and our second kid's a boy. So now there's a whole different set of expectations because boys and girls need different things in life. So, of course, I have thoughts, I have emotions that are running through my mind about that. And, as I mentioned, how do I navigate my marriage now that there are new people in the family? How can I continue to meet my responsibilities as I go through my daily life? Sometimes it felt overwhelming. Sometimes I felt stuck. And, that's the question that I pose to you. Have you ever felt stuck during a big change? Stick around for this episode, and we'll dive into some things that you might be able to do, and also, if you need some additional help, how therapy can help you. Now, as I alluded to at the beginning, life transitions are not always bad things, nor are they things that we can really avoid, because everyone is going to go through some kind of life transition. And it's not a good thing or a bad thing that these occur, it just is what life is. Life is not always set in stone, and people are people. People aren't computers. And a lot of times things are going to change. As I mentioned, sometimes that's for the better, and we welcome these changes, and sometimes it's not, and we really try to resist or push back against these changes. But it's really in pushing back against these things that we might find ourselves getting stuck, or really just getting upset, feeling depressed, anxious. And through acceptance, which we'll get into in a little bit, we might be able to make these life transitions a bit more tolerable. So once again, what are some of these big life changes that can occur to us on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis? Well, I imagine some of these wouldn't be daily, but you get my point. As an example, I talked about jobs. Jobs are never static. I hear stories from back in the day, the early to mid 20th century, and you would get a job and you would work there for the next 40, 50 years and get your pension, and that was your career. Sounds very stable. Even within that, though, there were going to be changes. Sometimes new opportunities within a company would pop up. Sometimes promotions. Sometimes people would get laid off. And think about the workforce today. In today's day and age, as I record this in the year 2025, jobs can be more volatile than ever, especially considering much of the United States is very services-based these days. Not as much manufacturing, and so a lot of services, digital jobs, and this is fine. I have no problem with people having those types of jobs. It's just that it can be turbulent at times. I often hear about the changes in the tech market as an example, where there'll be a new technology that shows up and a lot of booming and a lot of jobs that flow into that. And then maybe we get bored of it, maybe something better comes along, and all those people then get laid off. A great example of this that has kind of already started happening, as I record this, the rise of AI. So with AI, a lot of jobs that maybe used to have needed a human touch, say things like SEO, people are outsourcing to AI these days. Now, you can make the argument that maybe it's still better to have a person behind the screen helping you with such things, but that's not really what I'm talking about. Really, what I'm talking about is that's just what is happening. And sometimes if we go through a bad economic time, you might get laid off even if you do have a job that most people value. Think back to 2020 when COVID was happening. A lot of people lost their jobs and their livelihoods, even if it was a job that people wanted. Or I should say, a job that people valued, society valued. And a career shift like that, of course, I hope it's only a once-in-a-generation sort of thing, and it can happen. It can happen. So, of course, any kind of career shifts, even those positive ones, like I mentioned, a promotion. With promotion comes a lot of new responsibilities. That's a lot more pressure. Yeah, the pay can be nice. It also means a lot more responsibility, typically, and that can weigh on a person. So, shifts in your career are things that can lead to some trouble with life transitions. But what about some other things? We can take a look at personal milestones, marriage. Getting married is a wonderful thing, and I highly encourage everybody, as long as you are being intentional about what you want and who you are with, I highly encourage people to consider marriage. It's not for everyone. But for those who it is for, being intentional, getting married, one of the best things that I ever did. And it can be a joyous thing. It can also be a shift, a big shift. Think about living your life solo and all of the typical things that you would do as a single person. Even if you were dating, you were still single, you were still living your life. Even if you were living with the person you were dating, you had no real responsibility to them. And what I mean by that isn't that you don't have responsibility to someone that you're dating. Really, what I mean by that is you can leave at any time. Now, the same is true for divorce, of course, but it is a bit more difficult to do that versus we're just going to break up and go our separate ways. With a marriage, you're coming together. You're forming a family, a new family. And so this particular relationship, there's joy to it and there can be conflict because coming together under the same roof, learning each other in a different way, saying, wow, I'm giving up being single for the rest of my life. I'm giving up dating for the rest of my life. And I am going to be with this person only. That's a big change. Same is true with divorce. I mean, getting divorced can be devastating for people, especially if you're the one on the receiving end of it. Because, man, maybe you wanted to make the relationship work. Maybe you were willing to put in all that extra effort. And yet the other person just decided, no, they don't want to put that effort into the relationship anymore. It can be absolutely heartbreaking for the person on the receiving end. And sometimes it's heartbreaking for the person on the initiating end. Maybe it's something that they don't want to do. They recognize, wow, this just is not going to work out and it's not going to be I'm not going to live a wonderful life, essentially, if I am with this person who I fell out of love with, who I maybe actively dislike, maybe who I feel unsafe with in some ways. So divorce is, of course, a big, big life transition. I already talked a little bit about becoming a parent. Think about the end of that, being an empty nester as an example. This is something I tend to hear a lot about. In particular, it affects women generally a bit more because now your child is grown. You know, this little creature that you grew inside of you and this tiny little baby that you needed to change its diapers and keep it alive, they are now off into the world, living their lives. And you know what the world's like because you've been in the world for a minute. So not only is there fear and anxiety around that child going off, then it becomes, well, what's my purpose now? Some people, for better or for worse, have defined their lives as the parent. And now that you don't have that child around, it can be devastating. Who am I? What am I going to do with the rest of my life? This type of life transition can be really hard for people to accept and to work through. A few other common ones that tend to show up, think about health or age-related changes. Of course, there can be things like serious illnesses that pop up. One of the most common ones that you're going to hear about that only affects half the population, but think about menopause. That's a big life transition. And similarly for men, think about that classic midlife crisis. You know, you're feeling youthful, you're feeling energetic, you're feeling like you can take on the world and there's still so much for you to do, and then you've hit that halfway point in your life. What have I done with half of my life? Have I accomplished all the things that I want to? Maybe I didn't. Maybe I want to relive some of those youthful fantasies that I had. And, you know, same can be true for women as well. So that change in age can be a big deal. The same is true for something like retirement. Think about people, especially high achievers. This is a big deal. You've worked really hard your whole life, consistently, you've accomplished a lot, and then you hit 65 or 70 or 75, whatever age you decide to retire. And now you don't have to do that thing anymore. Now you find yourself waking up whenever you want to, with no particular tasks to do, And you kind of have to make your life something. You have to fill that time with something. A lot of people can feel useless. A lot of people can feel like they've lost something. It can also lead to other issues. You may or may not remember if you listen to this episode. If you haven't, I highly recommend you go check out the Therapy 101 episode on trauma. When people retired, particularly older veterans, Vietnam veterans, that was a big problem because now they didn't have work, all the trauma came back, right? So that retirement can not just be a life transition that's difficult to deal with, it could also lead to other unexpected changes in one's life. Which leads me to my last point, which is unexpected events. Some of the common ones that I often work with people on, think about grief. We don't always know when people are going to die. And even if we do know when people are going to die, it can still be difficult to work through that grief, especially if it's someone that we deeply and truly cared about. Or even think about situations like weather events, any hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes. Maybe you need to relocate because of that. That can be really stressful, especially if you buy into a lot of, insurance companies' commercials, which are, of course, dramatized. The commercials will start off with, people walking through this devastation and they'll see their house gone, burned down, maybe destroyed by a storm, and then, fast forward through the next 20 seconds and you see everything being restored, and isn't it wonderful? The truth is, though, that while that's trying to get you to buy insurance, the truth is that does happen to people. And I've worked with people where that's happened to them, where they've lost everything in some unexpected event like that. And how you transition into a new phase of your life, especially if something was lost. As an example, I worked with somebody once who their house was set on fire by a faulty product that they bought from a big website, and the whole house just lit up, and that included the loss of their pets. So not only did you lose everything in that fire, but you also lost, members of your family. And I know there are people out there that think, oh, pets aren't members of the family, they're not people, and that's true. But for people that own pets, that people that love pets, you grow to be attached to them, and they're attached to you. And of course, to lose pets in such an awful way, as well as all of your things, it's hard. And so whatever your life transition is, all of these life transitions are going to have some kind of emotional impact. As I touched on a bit earlier, you might have anxiety, you might have grief, you might not really be sure who you are, that identity loss. Sometimes we have what's called decision paralysis. We just don't know what to do. A classic example of this is consider somebody who just graduated college, or maybe someone who just graduated high school, they don't want to go to college. The world is completely open to you now. Nobody's going to be holding your hand. What do you do moving forward? And this type of reaction is not something that's uncommon, even though, as the joke goes, 42% of statistics are made up. From what I saw when I did my research, studies have shown that about 70%, maybe even more, of people experience some kind of stress during a major change in their lifetime. And if you're new to the show, how I define stress is when expectations outweigh resources. You just don't have enough to help you get through those expectations. And isn't that what a life transition is? A lot of times, things will pop up in life transitions, even ones that are expected and valued, that we didn't realize, and we might not have the tools to work through that. And maybe this is some of you who are listening. Imagine moving to a new city, a new state, for a dream job, not knowing anyone, feeling isolated. Does that sound familiar? Maybe you're somebody who wants to reach out and meet new people, but you just don't know how, especially in a place that's already established. People already have their routines, and now here you are coming in trying to make friends or connections. Maybe the people in that area want that, and that's great if so. A lot of times they don't, because people already have their routines. So, if transitions are inevitable, how can therapy make them easier? Well, there are a few ways that therapy can help people during life transitions. So, first off, and I know this phrase gets overused a lot these days, but in this case, I think it applies. And that's that therapy can provide people with a safe space to process their emotions. Now, what do I mean by safe space? A lot of times when people talk about a safe space in society, it's a place where it's kind of taken on the meaning where you don't have to hear the things that you don't want to hear. And it's just kind of nice and childish and insulated. But that's not really what therapy does with a safe space. Therapy is really meant to offer a non-judgmental ear. In this case, the focus is on the client and letting them explore whatever thoughts, whatever emotions that they have, even if they're kind of dark, even if they're thoughts that if they told somebody else, that other person would maybe reject them. Yet these are things that people need to sort through if they want to have a calmer, happier mental world. You can think about it like this. Everyone has some kind of messy suitcase. All that baggage that we're carrying with us. And a lot of times we'll open the suitcase and we'll put things in there nice and neat and everything's ordered. Sometimes we just open it and throw all of our stuff in there and then slam it shut and go, we'll deal with this later. Well, that's what a therapist is for, to help you sort through that stuff so that you're not overwhelmed when later does come. Another way that therapy tends to help people is by building coping skills. Now, this is a phrase that tends to get thrown around a lot. Coping skills, use your coping skills. At least maybe that's just my bias because of the world that I live in, which is mental health. But coping skills really is just a set of tools. It's a set of tools that you put in your metaphorical toolbox, your mental health toolbox, to bring out whenever you face a particular situation. So as an example, what I would work on with my clients, if they were so inclined, we could practice mindfulness. Now, when I talk about mindfulness, I define it very simply. And anyone listening to this, I'm about to save you thousands of dollars on mindfulness seminars, so you are welcome. And that is paying attention on purpose to the present moment non-judgmentally. And by non-judgmentally, what I mean is focusing on the facts of the situation. Not how I wish it to be, not how I want it to be. How is the situation now? How am I feeling about the situation now? It's not good or bad. It's just what it is. And if I'm able to take a look at the situation as it is, rather than how I want it to be, I'm going to be able to make more effective decisions. Another example of a coping skill that I would use with someone is journaling. I know this tends to be cliche, and sometimes people will tell me, I don't like journaling, and that's fine. You don't have to do it if you find that it's not great for you. For a lot of people, though, they've never really tried it. Taking the time to sit down and write out our thoughts can be massively helpful for people. There are plenty of studies out there that talk about how actually handwriting things helps us process these events better and encode them better into our brain, memory, emotional centers, etc. I don't know about you all, but I tend to be on screens most of the day. And it's funny because as I was growing up, I would often say, my hand hurts, I wish I could just type things out. It's so much faster, it's so much more efficient, and it is. It's also true that the handwriting piece helps us think more clearly. And so if people are struggling with emotions, taking some time to sit and journal, whatever it is that you start to write. Maybe it's a bunch of nonsense, a stream of consciousness. Maybe there's a specific thing that you want to talk about. Whatever the case may be, it can be extremely helpful to handwrite in a journal. A third example of something that I might help people with in terms of building coping skills is a fancy psychology phrase called cognitive reframing. In other words, this is a technique that helps us not only catch what thoughts we're having about a situation, but then how do we test if those thoughts are accurate or not? If we find out that that thought is not accurate, how can we tweak it to make it accurate? So, as an example, one common thought that I often hear is, I can't do this thing. I can't open up to somebody. I can't handle this. And I will oftentimes respond with a simple question, which is, can't or won't? And all the clients I tend to work with, they will pause and they'll think. A lot of times they'll say, well, maybe it's a bit of both. And then as we go through it, maybe it's actually more just that I won't do it. I'm choosing not to do it. And listen, we all do this. I do this too. I'll tell myself, oh God, I can't handle this thing. It feels too much, like it's too much. But the reality is I can handle it. I can do it. And I'm going to handle it as long as I catch my thoughts. Because once I catch my thoughts and tweak them to something that's a bit more accurate, that's going to improve my own emotional well-being and my follow-through with the task at hand. An example of this, think about during a divorce. Of course there are a lot of emotions flying. Of course there are going to be a lot of difficult thoughts to sort through. Therapy might help reframe failure, I failed in my marriage, as a potential growth opportunity. Now, that might be a difficult thing to accept for the person going through the divorce, yet it is something that is true at the end of the day, that a difficult situation can be seen as a failure. It can also be seen as an opportunity for growth, to move forward into a new phase of life with new knowledge, new information that maybe you didn't have before. Which is something that I often get with clients who will roll their eyes at me. But that's two things can be true at once. And in this case, one can feel like a failure, one can think they are a failure, and also have new information to help them. And as they continue to work through their emotions, as they continue to practice coping skills, maybe those thoughts of being a failure start to fade. And maybe they do end up moving forward in a new way that they wouldn't have if they didn't have that cognitive reframing coping skill. Another way that therapy can help with life transitions is helping people gain perspective and clarity. I've heard this a lot in my career, that therapists tend to act as mirrors. If you are seeing someone for therapy and they are telling you what to do, yeah, there are certain strains of psychology that do that. I find them to be pretty ineffective because oftentimes people tend to know what they quote-unquote should and shouldn't do. They don't really need to pay somebody to tell them that. What people pay therapists for is to help them identify patterns and blind spots. So, case in point of this, one thing that I tend to work with people on is changes in relationships. And starting new relationships, ending old relationships, whether they're dating relationships, marriages. And as we go through, particularly with people who are dating, though of course this can apply with people who are married and maybe getting divorced, one of the things that I will help them on is identify the type of person that they go for. Right? And we all kind of do this in some way, or we know someone like this. They go for a type. Right? They have a specific type of person that they go for. And sometimes that particular type of person isn't going to be all that helpful for us. Sometimes what we say we want versus what we ultimately end up going for is not the same. There is a mismatch there. And so by being able to identify what I say I want versus what I go for and where the gap is, where the mismatch is there, that can help people gain perspective and clarity on their actions. Well, why did I do that? Well, let me reflect on my life. Let me think about the choices and the events that got me to this point where I just kind of slipped into this pattern of going after people for dates that really aren't good for me. Another way that therapy can be helpful for people going through life transitions is it really helps them better navigate relationships and support systems. A lot of times people will tend to feel alone as they go through something that's different. Maybe they have difficulty relating to other people. Maybe they feel like nobody understands them. And by being able to talk about how the client that I'm working with, how they're communicating, how they're viewing other people, maybe the communication patterns of others in their lives that they consider support systems, whether they're healthy support systems or not, can be useful during transitions that affect friends and family. And, having a space where people can also engage in perspective taking too can be quite useful. The other day I was on Twitter, and what was fed to me through my feed was a study that showed how people's thoughtfulness of others, people's sympathies, people's empathy for other people has gone down in recent years, particularly with the rise of social media. And we got to remember that social media, it hasn't even been around 20 years yet. I seem to remember Facebook, and I was not of the first generation of Facebook when it first showed up, but even things like MySpace, I was there for that. Social media really maybe just barely has hit 20 years. I'll stand corrected. You can Google it and call me out on it if I'm wrong on the dates. But my point is this, that it affects us in ways that we still have yet to understand. And think about, especially Twitter, but think about any kind of social media platform. Someone will post something maybe exciting, and all of a sudden they get attacked by people who are just miserable. Or maybe something will post something, sad, and others will make fun of them for it. This type of behavior is unfortunately common in social media land. And we don't always get the other side of things, which is somebody in our lives who is genuinely concerned about us and wants to understand what we're going through. And sometimes that's the therapist. The therapist can be the stand-in for that while the client is going out and improving their support systems, finding new people who can take on that role in their lives, whether it's friends or family. And lastly, therapy can help people with life transitions because it can prevent bigger issues from arising. Early intervention is always better than late intervention. Think about that common phrase, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So if, say, we think back to the woman who moved to a new city and she's stuck, right? She just doesn't feel like she fits in. She's isolated, and yes, she has her job, but she doesn't really know anybody. She's just concerned about if she's going to make it there. It's going to be better for her to get into therapy as soon as possible versus being in that type of situation for 1, 2, 3 years and then starting therapy, because there's probably going to be bigger issues that come up as a result of that. Maybe it's depression, maybe it's burnout, maybe in that case, being isolated for 3 years, it might even be substance use. Who knows? But the point is that it's better to get seen earlier to help with small stresses rather than have those develop into something large and really difficult to manage. So what are some types of therapy that can help? Well, if you are interested in hearing about these more in depth, go check out my very first Therapy 101 episode that talks about what to expect when you are going to seek out therapy. Now, that being said, just kind of as a quick recap, some accessible options, some more common options that you're going to see is going to be that cognitive behavioral therapy, which is going to help you understand the relationship between thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and then tweak some of those negative thought patterns or behaviors to help you live a better life. Some of it's going to be that client-centered therapy, and that's my personal blend. It's CBT and client-centered therapy. And client-centered therapy is focused on providing an atmosphere that provides empathy and values you as a person, that sees you as who you are, and allows you to work through your concerns in a non-judgmental environment. Of course, there are other types of talk therapy out there, like psychodynamic, which is more Freud's sort of flavor of things. And so I'd encourage you, maybe do some research in terms of what type of therapy you'd like. Of course, all of what I mentioned is more individual therapy. You can also do group therapy. That might be helpful for you. And, here's the other thing, too. Sometimes people think, okay, but if I start therapy, then I really have to just stay in therapy for 17 years, and I just don't want to do that. And here's the thing. I'm not that guy. Yes, there are some therapists out there that might promote that, and there are some clients out there that need that. The reality is, though, most people don't need prolonged therapy, unless they choose it, right? But most people don't need it. And that's what I tend to do when I work with people. I try to make sure that, okay, I'm going to see what the problem is. I'm going to see how long they want to stay, and we're going to get to work on that problem. And maybe it's a year, maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's 12 sessions, I don't know. But whatever it is, it's all about helping them accomplish their goals as soon as possible, to be respectful of their time, their money, and of course their lives, helping them to heal as quickly as possible. So in other words, it takes as long as it takes, and we don't take any more time than is necessary. Now, I will also hear people say, okay, that's great, Greg. Life transitions, that's something that can be difficult, but I can make it through, and that's fine. It's not really a big deal. I'm not depressed. I'm not anxious. And that might be. But I'm also going to encourage you, take a moment and recognize some of the signs that you need some support. You're going through your daily life and some big life transition happens. Maybe you're in the midst of it right now. Are you having some sadness throughout the day? Are you feeling down? Are you having sleep issues? Are you avoiding doing something or procrastinating doing something? Are you noticing that you're spending a lot of your time just trying to decompress from the day? And it's not to say kind of in a nice, I just need one day off sort of thing. Every day, you're coming home, you're finding yourself sort of in this, for lack of a better phrase, survival mode. And you just need to sit and maybe even stare at a wall because you're so overstimulated, or just lose yourself in some TV show. Or do you find that maybe you've gotten some kind of addiction or unhealthy habit? Maybe that's shopping too much. Maybe it's actually using a substance. Maybe it's gambling. Maybe it's losing yourself in a game, an app. Whatever the case may be, those might be signs that you need some support as you get through your life transition. If you think that you do need some extra help, then what you're going to want to do is find a therapist. And once again, in shameless self-promotion, check out Royal Oasis Psychotherapy Institute in the description below. Because, hey, I offer elite and discreet psychotherapy, and I create custom treatment plans just for you and whatever it is that you are looking to accomplish. Now, let's say for some reason you don't want to work with me. I guess there's no accounting for taste, am I right? But you do want to then look at a directory of mental health providers. So the most common one is Psychology Today. There are others out there like Zen Care as an example. Monarch is another one that I've heard of. And so these different directories are going to outline what the therapist is good at and if they can help you with your particular issue. Now, I am going to throw something out there, and I'm going to throw a lot of people in my profession under the bus on this, but so be it. I highly recommend that you, as the listener, you find somebody who offers a free consultation. There are people in mental health who will offer consultations, but they will charge for such things. I personally find that to be pretty distasteful, and the reason for that isn't because I think mental health therapists' time isn't valuable, because our time is valuable, and if we're going to spend time talking with a client, or even a potential client, of course we deserve to be paid for that. The problem is that the client is trying to feel out if we'll be a good fit for them. And let's be real, on the other side of things, the therapist is looking to see if the client will be a good fit for them. Because sometimes people reach out and they have very specific needs, and maybe there's somebody else that would work better for them. And I don't think it's too much to ask, especially if a therapist is just starting out, to offer 10 to 15 minute free phone consultations. Because even if that person doesn't end up converting to an intake, at least that person knows what you're doing. Right? At least they have an opportunity to talk with you, and at least they can get any questions answered. So again, it's up to you if you want to pay, as a client, if you want to pay for a therapist to have a consultation with you. My opinion on it is find someone who's going to offer free consultations. Most people will, but there are those that charge for it, and I don't know if they're going to be any better than someone who offers a free consultation, to be honest. So keep that in mind as you look. Again, I'm sort of rehashing a little bit about that original Therapy 101 episode on what to expect when you're going through therapy. Just as a sort of reminder here, what to expect in sessions, generally speaking, for most types of therapy, it's going to be collaborative. You're not going in to be fixed, right? You are going in to work with someone in a collaborative setting to help you live a better life. And maybe the only thing that you have going on for you right now is just this life transition, and it's hard to get through. That's okay. You can still benefit from therapy. It doesn't have to be, oh, this life transition reminds me of this thing that happened with my mother when I was 5. It doesn't have to be that in order for you to benefit. So just keep that in mind. You can also, in collaboration with therapy, do some self-help. So maybe that's reading up on topics that are interesting to you, people that have gone through similar life transitions. Maybe it's listening to podcasts, like a certain one right now that you're definitely leaving a 5-star rating and review for, right? Which I appreciate very much. Or maybe it's exercise. Maybe it's going to the doctor and taking supplements. Whatever the case may be, the reality is that people will get through life transitions. They have done so before. They will continue to do so. And if you are going through one of these life transitions, just know that you will get to the other side of it, even if it's a difficult one. And if you've already gone through a life transition, think about what might have helped you with those. Maybe some of those things you can bring to this one and help you so that you don't have to struggle through it so much. And listen, I would love to hear about people's various life transitions. If you have a minute, please feel free to find me on Twitter, Dr. GT Obert. I'm going to put the link to that in the description below, so feel free to click on that. It'll take you right there. But if you have a minute to tell me about a life transition of yours, I'd love to hear it. Because really, when we hear about other people's stories, we recognize that we're not always alone, and that's really important. Therapy helps you thrive through your life transitions. It's not meant to be some sort of barrier or weight around your ankle. And listen, sometimes that happens with people. There's stigma around therapy. I've talked about this in previous Therapy 101 episodes. People have all sorts of negative views, stigma around therapy. Just remember, it's not a weakness to ask somebody for help. Because if we go through our lives never asking anybody for help, we're not going to do all that well. And in fact, it takes a lot of courage and a lot of strength to reach out to someone and say, hey, this isn't working for me, and I'm not really sure what I need to do. So can you please help me? So to summarize, life transitions can be difficult. They can be welcome, they can be unwelcome, they can be exciting, they can be dreadful. The point is that you're not alone. This episode we talked about what life transitions are and how they can challenge us. We also talked about how therapy can help you out. And think about some of those coping skills that you might be able to use in your own lives, even just after listening to this episode. Remember, things like mindfulness, journaling, exercise can be helpful, and even practicing that cognitive reframing. Remember the signs that maybe you do need some additional support. If you're feeling alone, if you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling like no one cares about you, if you're feeling sad, if you're feeling anxious, if you're procrastinating, if you're avoiding something, if your sleep is bad, maybe these are signs that you need to reach out to a therapist to get some additional help. But once again, just remember that this life transition does not have to be the be-all, end-all for you. Even if it is difficult, there is something on the other side. And by taking the time to work through your emotions, examine your thinking, and maybe even change some of your behaviors, you will be able to get to that light at the end of the tunnel. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Therapy 101. If you've listened this far, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. And if you are enjoying this series, I'm going to have, as they say, the call to action. Please reach out to me some way or another. There are a lot of ways to reach out to me in the description. And I say this because I think these episodes have a lot of value in them, but I haven't really heard from people one way or the other if they found it to be useful or not. So if this is something that people still enjoy in the off weeks of the meditations, I'd be happy to keep it going for a while. And if not, then I won't. And I'll scrap it and find something else to put in those off weeks. But if you have found some value in this episode, please, please, please leave a 5-star rating and review wherever you are listening to this. And if you think I could help you out, check out once more Royal Oasis Psychotherapy Institute. The website is in the description, royaloasispi.com. And send me a message. Let's get something set up so that we can get to work on whatever issue you are dealing with in your life. Thank you all for your continued support. I really appreciate each and every one of you. And until next time, be safe, be well, be powerful.